How does a man run from a past that follows him like a shadow? That was the question buried deep in Nathaniel Burke's chest as the wind pushed against him like a living thing. The Wyoming sky was wide and cold, the kind that made a man feel small no matter how tall he stood. Nate watched the surveyor drive the last stake into the dry ground. Each hammer strike sounded like a final goodbye to everything he had ever known. In 1 week he would be gone. 1 week, until he sold the land his father had built with his bare hands. 1 week until he left the valley that had taken more from him than it ever gave. The Rocking Bee Ranch had become nothing but a graveyard of memories. His father gone, his mother gone, and Jed, his younger brother, lost to a bullet during the range war. The whole valley blamed Nate for that. He blamed himself more. The wind cut through his coat as he rode toward town. Laram Fork was a tired little place, crouched against the cold like it was hiding from the sky. When Nate walked into Henderson's Mercantile, the room went dead quiet. Mrs. Davies turned her back on him the second she saw his face. Henderson spoke to him politely, the kind of polite a man used for someone he wished would disappear. Nate had grown used to it, being the older brother who lived, being the man who couldn't save the boy everyone loved. He bought tobacco he didn't want, stepped back outside, and rolled a cigarette with shaking fingers. He didn't care what these people thought anymore. He would be gone soon, far away from this land of dust and death. He was halfway home when he saw her. Clara Dunning. She stood by the wreck of her barn, her hands on her hips, staring at the broken roof like she was ready to fight it with her bare hands. She was a small woman, but she moved like she refused to bend for anyone or anything. Her light brown hair whipped in the wind, strands escaping her tight knot and flying across her face. Nate planned to ride past without stopping. But then she called his name. "Burke!" Not a plea, a command. He sighed, pulled his horse to a stop, and waited. Clara marched toward him, her boots kicking up dust, her jaw tight. "You see that?" she said, pointing at the barn where the roof had caved in under heavy snow. "I see it," Nate said. "There are 2 horses and my milk cow in the standing half," she said. "That side won't last another storm, and winter's not done with us." "That's a shame, Mrs. Dunning." "A shame won't stop my stock from freezing," she snapped. "I need help." Nate stiffened. "I'm leaving, ma'am, in a week." "I heard." She stepped closer, her eyes sharp. "I can't pay you, but I'll trade. I've got canned goods, sewing, whatever you want. Just help me get a roof over that stall before the next snow." He looked away. Her barn was a disaster. A job too big for one person, barely possible for 2. But he thought of his own empty week ahead. 7 long days of staring at cold walls, waiting for the sale. And something in her face, a flicker of pride mixed with desperation, hit him harder than the wind. He let out a long breath. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll come at first light." "But it's a teardown, not a repair." Quote, "Bring your good saw," she said, then turned and marched away without a thank you. Nate cursed under his breath as he rode home. Why did he say yes? Why did he care? This wasn't his fight. This wasn't his problem. But the next morning, just as the pale yellow sun rose, he was there. Clara was already working, dragging broken beams out of the wreckage. She didn't stop when he arrived. She didn't smile either. "Coffee's on the stove," she called. "It's cold." They worked side by side in silence. The cold bit into their fingers. Their breath fogged the air. The main support beam had snapped clean in 2. The whole thing needed to come down before it could go back up. But Clara didn't complain, didn't whine, didn't slow down. She swung a pry bar like a seasoned ranch hand. She carried heavy beams with a stubborn strength that surprised him. At midday, she gave him hot coffee and bread with apple butter. They sat on a log, eating without looking at each other. It was the first warm meal he'd shared with another living soul in a very long time. By the 3rd day, they had a plan. A simple lean-to roof to save her animals. Ugly, but strong. Nate felt something shift inside him as they worked, something he didn't want to name. But it broke on the 3rd afternoon when he smashed his thumb with the hammer. "Damn this place!" he yelled, tossing the hammer aside. "This land takes everything. It took my family, my brother. It'll take your barn again, or your fence, or something else. It always takes." Clara straightened, her breath sharp in the cold. "It doesn't promise to give anything back," she said quietly. "It just is. We're the fools who expect it to be kind." Her words cut straight through him. He didn't argue. He just picked up the hammer. By sunset, the roof was done. Patchy, ugly, but solid. She cooked him stew that night, a simple meal in her warm, small cabin. They ate quietly, the fire crackling between them. For a moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace, warmth, belonging. When he went out to check the bracing in the hayloft, he didn't expect her to follow him. But she did. She climbed the ladder, her hair loose now, her face softened by the moonlight. She stepped close to him, close enough that he felt her breath. "Thank you, Nate," she said. And then she kissed him. Not gently, not shyly, with a hunger that shook him to his core. His world shattered. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. He grabbed her arms, pulled her back just enough to breathe, but not enough to let her go. They stood there in the cold moonlight, hearts pounding, her kiss burning on his mouth. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not anymore. What happens when two broken people try to pretend nothing happened? That question hung between Nate and Clara like a rope pulled tight the morning after that kiss in the hayloft. He rode away before dawn, not trusting himself, not trusting her, not trusting whatever had sparked in the dark. But the memory of her mouth on his stayed burning in him like a live coal. The next 3 days were pure torment. Nate returned each morning because he had promised to finish the roof. They worked side by side from daybreak to sundown, but they spoke only when they had to. "Hand me the hammer." "That board is cracked." "Hold this beam." Their silence was sharp, brittle, ready to break if either of them pushed too hard. The barn got patched. The walls got reinforced. But the air between them stayed tight enough to choke on. At midday on the 4th day, they finished the last plank. Nate packed his tools with stiff, tired movements. "It's done," he said quietly. "It is." Clara answered without looking at him. She stood near the stall door, arms crossed tight against her chest. "Thank you." That was all. No softness, no warmth, just a wall. She wanted him gone. He felt it. He mounted his horse, ready to leave the moment behind forever. "You should bank the north wall," Nate said, forcing the words out. "The wind'll drift snow bad there." "I know," she replied, sharp and short. He nodded, turned his horse and rode away before he said something stupid. The kiss had changed nothing for her. For him, it had changed everything. That night, a storm rolled in like a living monster. Wind screamed around his cabin. Ice slammed against the windows. Nate tried to ignore the roar, but all he could see in his mind was the patched roof. The old boards. The place they hadn't reinforced because the weather had turned too fast. His gut twisted. His hands shook. What if the storm tore it down? What if she was alone in the dark, with the barn walls breaking under the wind? He cursed, grabbed his coat, and walked out into the violent sleet. The storm knifed his face, but he kept moving. Half a mile, then a quarter. Then he saw a lantern. Someone was at the barn. He ran. The door slammed open from the wind, and there she was, Clara, on a ladder, fighting a loose board that the storm had ripped away. Her hair was soaked. Her hands were blue. The canvas she was trying to nail down whipped like a wild animal. "What in God's name are you doing?" he shouted. "It's freezing my animals," she yelled back. "I have to close this wall." "You're going to get yourself killed. Get down!" Quote, "Don't tell me what to." He grabbed the ladder and shook it. She lost her balance and clutched the rungs, gasping. "Clara, down, now." She climbed down, shaking with cold and fury. "I had it," she snapped. "You had nothing," he shot back. "You're freezing." The storm howled. Ice slammed into the barn like a fist. "Get inside," Nate ordered. "I'll fix it." "No! The barn is—" "Go!" he roared. "Go!" This time she listened. She ran for the cabin, disappearing into the blizzard. Nate turned to the board. The wind nearly tore the hammer from his hand. His fingers went numb. Ice crawled down his collar. But he worked. He fought the storm and the wood like they were living beasts. It took nearly an hour, but he fixed it. When he stumbled back inside the barn, Clara returned carrying a wool blanket and a steaming tin mug. "I brought you coffee," she said softly. He was shaking, cold and exhausted, and she wrapped the blanket around his shoulders. The heat burned through him. She handed him bread and bacon. He ate like a starving man. "You're a fool," he muttered through chattering teeth. "A damn fool." "I'm a survivor," she said. He looked at her, her wet hair stuck to her face, her cheeks red from cold. "No," Nate said. "You're a woman trying to fight a dying barn in a blizzard." "And what are you?" she fired back. "A man trying to fight ghosts." The words cut him deep. He flinched. "I know about your brother," she whispered. "I know what the town says." He clenched his fists. "You don't know anything about that." "I know guilt when I see it," she said. "I know a man drowning in it." Something snapped inside him. "You think you know me?" he yelled. "You think you know what I've lost?" The storm roared around them. His chest heaved. His hands trembled. And then she walked up to him. She grabbed his frozen hand and shoved it under her coat, pressing his palm flat against her chest, against her heart. "You feel that?" she whispered. "That is not death. I'm alive. I'm right here." Thunder cracked outside, shaking the barn. Nate stared down at his hand, stunned by the heat of her heartbeat, her face, her trembling lips, the silent tears on her cheeks. Something inside him broke. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't slow. It was wild and deep and hungry, like two people fighting for air after being underwater too long. His hands moved through her damp hair. Her fingers dug into his back. He pushed her against the stall wall, their breath mixing in the cold air. It was heat against ice, life against the storm. They climbed a ladder into the hayloft together, stumbling and shaking, lips never breaking apart. And there, in the thick, sweet smell of hay, with the wind screaming outside, they came together in a desperate, reckless rush, seeking warmth, seeking life, seeking something neither of them could name. When the storm was over, the world outside was buried in white. Inside the loft, Clara slept curled against him. Nate stared at the rafters above, shame and longing twisting inside him. What had he done? What had they done? He slipped away before the sun rose, climbing down the ladder quietly, her body still wrapped in quilts. He didn't wake her. He didn't look back. By midday, both of them pretended nothing had happened. They worked together in silence again, barely speaking, barely breathing. But everything had changed, everything. How do two people fight enemies outside their walls when the worst battles are inside their hearts? That question haunted Nate Burke from the moment the storm passed. The night in the hayloft had changed everything between him and Clara, but neither of them said a word about it. They worked in silence. They moved around each other carefully, like two people standing on thin ice. But trouble in the Wyoming Valley didn't care about their silence. It was already coming for them. One cold morning, as Clara scrubbed her cabin floor, a rider came up her path. Sheriff Harlan stepped down from his horse, his face tight with worry. "Mrs. Dunning," he said, twisting his hat in his hands, "I came to warn you." "About what?" "Frank Garrison is buying the whole valley, and he's planning to run you out." Clara froze, her breath caught in her throat. "He's buying up banknotes, raising feed prices. The man means to starve you off your land." Then his voice dropped. "And he's real angry at Burke for helping you." Clara thanked him with a stiff nod, but inside, fear took hold. She was alone, truly alone. That evening, Nate arrived, his face drawn and tired. He handed her something carved from wood. A small bird Jed had made for her little boy before he died. Found it in his things, Nate said softly. He wanted Thomas to have it. Clara's knees gave out. She sank onto the step, clutching the wooden bird to her chest. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Nate sat beside her in silence, and for the first time, she let her shoulder brush his without pulling away. But trouble didn't wait long. The next day, Nate overheard Garrison in town, laughing with two ranchers. "She'll be begging me by spring," Garrison crowed. "Once the banknote is mine, that widow won't last a month." Nate froze. The store spun around him. Garrison wasn't just after her land, he was after her. Nate walked straight out of town and into the saloon. He found Garrison at a back table. "The deal is off," Nate said. Garrison looked up slowly. "Burke, don't be stupid." "I'm not selling." Garrison leaned back. "You're making a mistake." His smile was thin as ice. "This valley is a long winter, Burke. Very long. Especially for men trying to play hero." Nate didn't answer. He just walked out. He knew what he had to do, warned Clara. He rode to her place and found her mending the fence. "Clara," he said, breathless, "Garrison means to ruin you. He's buying your debt. He's cutting off your feed. He wants you starved out." Instead of fear, her eyes burned with sudden anger. "Who asked you to speak for me?" she snapped. Nate blinked. "Clara, I'm telling you, This is my land, my fight, my life. You don't get to run in and take it over." Her voice shook. Her hands shook. Nate reached for her, but she pulled back as if his touch might burn her. "I don't need saving," she said sharply. "I won't be owned again." Her fear wasn't of Garrison. It was of Nate. Of what he represented. Another man stepping into her life, claiming to protect her. That night, Nate walked away. Broken. Angry. Lost. 2 days passed with no word. Clara believed he was gone for good. She thought she'd pushed him too far. She packed a small bag, planning to leave the valley before Monday, when Garrison's lies would send her to jail. But just as she opened her cabin door to run into the winter night, a horse stumbled into her yard. Nate fell off the saddle, covered in mud and bruises. "Nate!" she screamed, rushing to him. He leaned on her, shaking, barely able to stand. "I rode," he gasped. "I rode to Cheyenne. 2 days." "Why?" she cried, half sobbing. "Why would you do that?" He reached inside his torn coat and pulled out a folded paper, stamped, sealed, official. "I filed for the water rights," he whispered. "The creek. The whole creek. Your husband never claimed it. Garrison missed it. It's federal land." Her breath caught. "This." Nate swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "This gives the water to you. All of it. Every drop. Garrison can't touch it. The law can't touch it." Clara stared at the document in her shaking hands. He hadn't claimed her. He hadn't tried to save her as a wife. He had saved her as a free woman. The next morning, Garrison came with the sheriff and 2 deputies. "Mrs. Dunning," Sheriff Harlan said sadly, "I have a warrant to search your land for stolen cattle." Clara stepped forward, her chin high. "Before you do that," she said, handing him the paper, "you should read this." Harlan unfolded it. "Read. Read again." His jaw dropped. "Frank, this is a federal patent. She owns the water. All of it." Garrison's face turned purple. "That's impossible. It's fraud." "No, Frank," Harlan said. "This is federal jurisdiction. You can't touch her." He handed the paper back to Clara. "I'm sorry," he said to her quietly. "This warrant is void." The deputies turned their horses around. The sheriff left. Garrison stayed. His eyes burned with hatred. "This isn't over," he snarled at Nate. "You're dead men." He rode off in fury. The valley went quiet again. That night, the cabin was warm with firelight. Clara climbed the ladder to the hayloft where Nate sat, exhausted, bruised, but alive. She walked to him, her nightdress soft in the glow. "You didn't marry me," she whispered. "You didn't save me. You gave me back myself." She loosened the collar of her dress, her hands shaking with emotion. "You can ask me again now," she said softly, "and this time I will answer freely." He touched her cheek, his hand trembling. "Clara," he whispered. She kissed him. Slow, deep, true. They lay together in the hay, not in desperation this time, but in peace. For the first time, it felt like home. The winter storms came and went. Nate moved into her cabin. They rebuilt the ranch together. They planted lilacs for the spring. The town that once judged them now respected them. By spring thaw, the whole valley knew. Nathaniel Burke wasn't leaving, and Clara Dunning wasn't alone anymore. They had survived the land, the storms, the past, and they had found each other, together, forever.